stepping back actually from crystallized intelligence or fluid intelligence or verbal or spatial or any of these types of intelligence, defining intelligence in general has come up many times on the show. And I've spoken with philosophers and computer scientists about when we might have reason to say an AI is intelligent, or biologists and complexity theorists about when it's right to call a slime mold intelligent. But your approach to intelligence and the psychometric approach in general is quite different, and it's explicitly human. And I know this is a rather broad question to start with, but before we get into psychometrics, how do you think about defining intelligence in general? Is it something that should be done entirely operationally, or should it be stipulated? I mean, there are a bunch of possibilities and considerations.
Intelligence researchers for 100 years have focused on an empirical definition, and it is a fairly easy definition to understand. And it's not unique to humans, by the way. It's not. And it's called general intelligence, a general ability, irrespective of the content of the problem, to reason. One way to think about it is individual differences in learning and memory and attention. Some people can learn more than others. Some people pay attention better than others. Some people can remember more than others. All of those things are related to intelligence test scores. Now, the formal definition for most intelligence research is based on the observation made by Charles Spearman in the early part of the 20th century, that if you have tests of different mental abilities, there are, I don't know, an infinite number of mental abilities, from playing poker to spelling, to arithmetic, to picking horse race winners. I mean, there's all kinds of abilities, mental abilities. If you develop a test for each one of those many, many different mental abilities and test people, what you find is the scores tend to correlate with each other, and they all tend to be positive correlations. It's something called the positive manifold, meaning that if you do well on one test of mental ability, you tend to do well on all other tests of mental ability. Okay? And that implies all tests of mental ability have something in common. And that something in common is called the factor of general intelligence. Psychologists call it the G factor, G for general. Now, it turns out if you take IQ tests are good estimates of the G factor because standard IQ tests have different subtests. So you're sampling different mental abilities, different cognitive domains, and you can put those scores together, and that one score is a good estimate of the G factor. But the G factor at best is only accounts for about half of the variance in mental abilities. In addition to the general factor, there are specific factors like mathematical ability and verbal ability and spatial ability. They would be the big three individual factors in addition to the G factor. Most intelligence research is on the G factor, but there's also plenty on those individual factors. And a lot of psychometric research tries to figure out what is the structure of mental abilities. How many factors do you need? What is the relationship to those factors? The simple version is that the G factor alone is the single most important factor. Most neuroimaging studies and most genetic studies have some estimate of the G factor. And that's kind of where we are today. But even though G is, you can't measure G directly. There are no direct measures of intelligence. It's not like measuring distance, or it's not like measuring weight. There is no ratio scale of intelligence. Intelligence test scores have meaning only relative to other people. That is a major limitation of the field. Some people are trying to figure out ways to assess intelligence on a ratio scale, like by using reaction time or some metric where 300 milliseconds is twice as slow as 150 milliseconds. It's not true that people with an IQ of 140 are twice as smart as people with an IQ of 70. Doesn't work that way.